Hola, compañeros. It's your old pal, King Waspinator, and welcome back to Total Party Skills. Hit like and subscribe. As we all know, Dungeons & Dragons is about to release a new starter set, The Dragons of Stormwrack Isle. And obviously, sight unseen, I don't really have any particular opinion on the adventure module that comes with it. Seeing what the advertised contents of this box set is, seems a little disappointing, and I wish they had modeled it more on the Essentials kit instead of just yet another plain Jane starter kit with an adventure module, a handful of dice, and some pre-generated character sheets, and that's about it. The Essentials kit gives you, a map of the region that you're starting off in, along with a map of the town you start off in. You have a variety of, magic item cards, initiative cards, combat condition cards, a little thin, DM screen for beginners and stuff. All in all, a much more complete starter kit than the original starter set was, and this just kind of seems like a repeat of the first one. However, I will at least say that I have the impression, at least, that this is not going to be set in the immediate vicinity of Neverwinter. And, that gets me thinking about kind of how strange it is that, both of their starter sets that they have put out so far were both set next to one of the major cities of the Sword Coast, which, they've sunk a lot of time into developing the Sword Coast overall, except Neverwinter itself. Considering the amount of materials they've put out in terms of like the bigger adventure modules that have come out since 5th edition began, you would think setting your starting setting more closer to the vicinity of Waterdeep would have made more sense, since that city's probably got the most focus overall out of the various modules that'll come out. But unless I'm missing one, I can't really think of any of the bigger, thick, hardcover adventures for 5th edition that have really anything to do with Neverwinter at all. And so it's just strange that that's the starting point. Aside from a little bit of text that you get in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, you have to do the old thing. If you want a more canon representation of what Neverwinter is, and you're not just making it up or basing it off the stuff you remember from the Neverwinter video games, you're going to have to go to old Drive-Thru-RPG and hunt up one of the old tomes. And the one I would probably recommend is this one for 4th edition of all things, the Neverwinter campaign setting. Obviously, the stats blocks and such that you find in this book, you're going to have to ignore, and you'll have to, substitute, with 5th edition creatures or just design them yourself. And since it's set during 4th edition, it's like a generation ahead of the 5th edition setting, roughly 20, 30 years-ish, before, when 5th edition is supposed to be set canonically. But it gives you full description of the city of Neverwinter and its various neighborhoods, biographical information at least on major NPCs that you can then adapt to 5th edition stats. It talks about Helm's Hold, it talks about Gauntlgrim, it gives you multiple factions and cults and lots of other little tidbits that you kind of need if you really want to properly flesh out the actual area that you're going to start your characters off in if you're using one of the established starter set box sets. And, I think a chunk of why 5th edition at times feels lacking in the writing department is, because of the previous editions already having done all the work. Like, why would they put out another Neverwinter campaign setting when they had just written one, basically? Why reprint the old text? Why do they have to hire new writers if they can just reprint the old stuff over and over again? Maybe occasionally just hire some new artists to slap some new art on it and put out a new edition that way. But, they want people to write something fresh, but that thing that they're writing can't just be a carbon copy of the old thing. And since the old things have already gone into so much detail, you can either just sit there and just try to paraphrase, what has already been said, or you can just kind of ignore it, or you can just go and develop another part that wasn't leaned on as heavily in the past. And I feel that, that's kind of like the vague mix of things that have gone on to kind of explain why they haven't really given Neverwinter, the attention that I feel like it should have had more of. We get Baldur's Gate, we get Chult, we get Icewind Dale, didn't they have like a giant adventure set around Silvery Moon? You had the Desirand Valley got a whole adventure module for itself. There's been at least 2 or 3 set in Waterdeep. And yet, if you're starting off with your starter box starter set, running, the Lost Cave, the Lost Mine of Fandelver, or any of the little Dragon of Icespire Peak quests, the biggest city that you're most likely to visit first with your group of player characters is Neverwinter, and you get like what 3 or 4 paragraphs in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, and that's it. And so that's why if you are to go dig something up, it'd be this one. Now, like obviously, as I said, this is set like a generation before 5th edition's timeline, so, it's dealing with stuff like the Spell Plague, and the chasm in the middle of the city is still open, and a few other little things like that don't really quite match 5th edition presentation. Like because of its being a 4th edition book, a lot of elf characters are using the Eladrin race from 4th edition instead of being just variants on, elves like they are in 5th edition. The Shadar Kai are, presented. They hadn't been nailed down as being an elf race in 4th edition. They were kind of more like some sort of like pseudo quasi undead humans. Not quite, but almost people from the Shadowfell kind of shit. That's another thing that the Neverwinter campaign setting does have, though. It does describe Evernight, the Shadowfell version of Neverwinter, and it's got much more stuff going on in the Neverwinter Woods. It's just there's a lot of resources there that you kind of need if you're going to be setting a campaign that starts off and might stay within the boundaries of that map that they give you with the damn Essentials kit, which is also, you can basically find that map in this book. I mean, I feel like in some ways, like, maybe in part that might be why they used it as the jump-off point for 5th edition, because they had just developed all these materials for that area for 4th edition, but they don't want to have to immediately re-release a 5th edition version of the Neverwinter campaign setting, so instead they just, pick and choose a few things. Well, we already got this map going, we'll just slap that in there, and we'll set a town right here, and have some little adventures, and just hopefully they'll wander off into the Desserant Valley to have some adventures against elemental cultists or something. I don't know. Had it been me, I would have put more focus on Neverwinter for 5th edition, since that's kind of where you can kind of say it is the default start point for 5th edition adventuring, at least according to the modules they put out. So, just kind of sad that you have to go and find a 4th edition book and try to jury rig it. However, the fact that it does present that slightly older setting kind of does also, in a way, help inform dungeon masters, about like what kind of background information, what has been happening in the setting prior to the events of the adventure, when characters are asking like what the world's like and what's going on, it gives you lots of little things you can tell them about, like, oh yeah, 20 years ago this happened, and you can use that to spin off into little weird little sequel adventures, or just lift things that are there in that campaign setting and just modernize it and use it as if it hadn't happened. A lot of the stuff involving, Lord Neverember and his struggle to like gain control over the city and all that kind of stuff still perfectly applies to the 5th edition setting. He's just maybe a bit more further along and a bit more firmer established, but it's still not on lock. One of the primary differences is he doesn't have his lordship in Waterdeep anymore. He's more independent now as the regent protector, wherever the fuck he's calling himself over Neverwinter. Yeah, I don't know. It's something you need, and it's something they should have put some more time in, but I can kind of understand how it happened, even if they should have figured out a way around that anyway. They should have made themselves do the hard work of making a 5th edition Neverwinter campaign source book, instead of making us rely on having to go back to these old materials and have to do a lot of homework ourselves to make it fit with 5th edition. But at the same time, like I said, it's like, if you're just going to be reprinting old materials, then why do you need to hire all these new young diverse writers to, you don't. You could just keep reprinting the same old book over and over again, just slap a new cover on it periodically, and, kind of like they do when they put out a new edition of The Lord of the Rings, and it's like, oh, now it's got movie art, and now it's got an original painting, and oh, now it's got Galadriel's hands from Rings of Power on the cover. Oh, how stunning. Unfortunately, because Dungeons & Dragons is like owned by the kinds of companies it's been owned by for some time, it's stuck with that eternal growth thing. I mean, That's part of why they have to put out a new edition periodically, because their primary sales driver is their core rule books, and after you've kind of saturated the market with one set of core rule books, you got to like get a whole new set of core rule books out there to get those same people to buy them all again, because the amount of adventure modules and supplements, they just don't sell at quite the same levels, and there's only so many people out there who are ever going to be interested in this shit. But if you don't show your 4% growth for the third quarter, you might get your budget slashed, and because just showing a profit alone is not enough to not be a failure in this industry, and I guess that's sad. But anyway, like I said, you can at least check that book out and properly flesh out your starting setting for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, just by going on a drive-through RPG and checking out the Neverwinter campaign setting for 4th edition. And while you're there, you could also check out Total Party Skills. I got a whole little publisher page with a bunch of little books that you can purchase and look at and have fun with, including one that is an OSR setting that is very easy to adapt to D&D called Orc and Bone. And on that note, stay waspinated.